Hello, my name is Clint Jurke. I'm the Agronomy Director for the Canola Council of Canada and one of the co-chairs for the organizing committee for the Canola Week conference. Welcome to Canola Week. Really hope that this is a conference that is of good value for you. Hopefully there's some good information, some good connections, maybe even a little bit of fun. But before I get into what this conference is all about, I should start off with some thank yous. Thank you to our sponsors, our gold level sponsors, Alberta Canola, BASF, Bayer, Cargill, Manitoba Canola Growers Association, and SAS Canola. And our silver level sponsors, the Canadian Canola Growers Association, Global Institute for Food Security, and the Western Grains Research Foundation. Without their generous support, we wouldn't have this conference here today. And we certainly wouldn't have this conference without our organizing committee, which includes individuals from across the canola industry who put in a lot of hard work. At the beginning of the year, we certainly didn't imagine that this would be a virtual conference, but here we are. A very special thanks as well to Dr. Keith Downey, who 50 years ago started the canola industry meetings. And so here we are since 1970, 50 years of producing high quality meetings, which has really helped to generate the success of the canola industry is quite a legacy. I as well want to thank Dr. Wilf Keller. He started the Canola Innovation Day, which happens to be day 3 of this conference, back in 2003. But as well, Wilf has been the chair of organizing the canola industry meeting and canola innovation days here for the last 8 years. He just recently retired, and so we have some pretty big shoes to fill following Dr. Keller and Dr. Downey. So Canola Week is the amalgamation or the merger of these 3 meetings. Which 3 you might be asking? Well, it's the Canola Industry Meeting, the Canola Discovery Forum, which is organized by the Canola Council of Canada, and the Canola Innovation Day. So what's the difference between them? Well, the Canola Industry Meeting is largely focused on updates, updates for how the industry is doing, updates on how the crop progressed, research updates, as well taking a look at some of the bigger issues that the industry is facing. The Canola Discovery Forum is more of a workshop. Its focus in the past has been to talk about what are the research priorities for the industry, what are the big issues that in terms of canola production that we need to tackle, how can we work together to solve those issues, and looking at the research that's needed for that. And the Canola Innovation Day has been historically focused on genomics and genetics, but not so much anymore. It is more looking at the cutting edge research that's around the industry and even wider outside of our industry that potentially could have some big impacts. So welcome to the very first day, which is the Canola Industry Meeting Day. We have 2 sessions here today, each 2 hours long, a morning session and an afternoon session. All of the material in these sessions is pre-recorded, including this particular talk as well. But there is a live component to it. At the end of each session, at the end of the morning and at the end of the afternoon, there is a live Q&A session. So submit your questions during the presentations. A moderator will field them to a live panel at the end. But even if you don't get your questions addressed during the panel live Q&A discussions, each or most of the speakers will be available at virtual tables in the networking lounge. Now, this networking lounge can be found by going back to the lobby of this conferencing platform. And from there, you should be able to go into a networking lounge, find a bunch of virtual tables. Most of the speakers will be sitting at one of these tables and will be able to interact with you and address your questions. But this lounge is not just for interacting with speakers, it is there for everyone. So if you have some old friends or new colleagues that you would like to interact with, there is certainly that opportunity to do that either by text or by video chat. And hopefully there's a little bit of fun to be found in this conference as well. We have hidden a number of Easter eggs throughout the conference and conferencing platform, as well as some trivia questions that if you answer correctly, there will be a prize at the end of the session for the first one that is able to solve these. So I want to thank you all for joining us. Again, hopefully there is some good value here for you. But without further ado, I'd really like to introduce and thank our first host for being here, Dr. Keith Downey, and he's going to take us through this morning session. Thank you, and please welcome Keith.
Hello, and welcome to Canola Week. I'm Keith Downey, and I'm your host for the first session. Today, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the first canola industry meeting. That meeting was the start of the canola quality revolution that Larry Sernyk is going to tell us about in a few minutes. Members of the organizing committee and the Canola Council have been hard at work to bring you 3 days chock full of up-to-date canola information, good networking opportunities, and perhaps some fun. This year has been a challenging year for each of us, as well as for the total canola industry, as we learn to navigate through the pandemic and maintain contact with colleagues and friends. Make sure you join the networking lounge to set up some video meetings with colleagues or find new contacts to interact with and exchange information. Although we have a very different format this year, we hope you will embrace this opportunity to connect and engage. Now it's time for our first speaker, Larry Sernyk, one of Dr. Stephenson's early graduate students. He's going to give us some historic background information you will be receiving for the next 3 days. So here's Larry and Canola 101.
Good morning. My talk this morning is entitled Canola 101, A Brief History of Canola. Start off with a little quiz here. Canola refers to seeds of the genus Brassica. It includes species Napus, Rapa, and Jancia with specific quality characteristics. Which of these characteristics listed on this slide are the ones that differentiate canola from rapeseed? And the answers are erucic acid level and glucosinolate content. Here's the full definition of canola from the Canola Council of Canada website. Is seeds of the genus Brassica of these species here, where the oil contains less than 2% erucic acid and the solid component or meal contains less than 30 micromoles of any one or mixture of these glucosinolates per gram of air-dry oil-free solid. Now, rapeseed oil had been used for a long time in Asia for cooking oil and lamp oil. With the advent of steam engines in the 18th century, it was found that rapeseed oil with high levels of erucic acid was an ideal lubricant for steam engines because it would adhere better to metal surfaces than other oils. The first rapeseed in Canada was grown near Shelburne, Saskatchewan in a garden plot in 1936. The seed had originally come from Poland and it became known as Polish rapeseed in Canada based on its source. Now, prior to World War II, the demand for rapeseed oil in North America had been supplied by Europe and Asia, but blockades during World War II prevented that source from being available, and Canada's needs for domestically produced rapeseed became apparent. During the 1930s and 40s, agronomic research had indicated that rapeseed was very well adapted to Western Canada. In 1943, T.M. Stevenson brought some seed of the Brassica napus species to Western Canada and planted 3,000 acres that year. This seed had originally come from Argentina, and the species became known as Argentine in Canada. This slide here, called the Triangle of You after this individual right here, shows the relationship between the different Brassica species. You can see the Polish rapeseed or Rapa and Brassica napus, the Argentine rapeseed, are related, and they both contain the A genome. Napus also has the C genome, which is from Brassica oleracea, but it's relatively easy by plant breeding to move traits between those two species. Now, the rapeseed acreage had increased to about 12,500 acres in 1945. And that same year, the first crushing plant in Western Canada opened. It was a Prairie vegetable oils plant in Moose Jaw. By 1948, the rapeseed acreage had peaked about 80,000 acres, but by the end of the decade, it had decreased way back to 500 acres due to the removal of the blockades present during World War II, and also the shift from steam engines to diesel engines. During the war years, Dr. William White had started a rapeseed breeder program at the Dominion Forage Lab in Saskatoon, and he worked with Dr. Henry Salins, who was doing chemistry of rapeseed, and the two of them, through their efforts, came up with the very first variety of Brassica napus called Golden, which was released in 1954. In the 60s, there were also breeding programs at Ag Canada in Saskatoon and University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, and they released a series of varieties here that you can see on this slide, which were basically selections or reselections from the original Argentine and Polish stocks, except for one example, which was an introduced variety from Sweden. There was a group of dedicated scientists who in Western Canada believed in the potential of the crop there. And they continued to work on finding alternative uses for rapeseed to oil to boost the sagging demand. As a result of their efforts, the rapeseed acreage was increased from 6,000 acres in 51 to 750,000 acres by 1960. Now, the early canola researchers only had access to distillation techniques for analyzing the rapeseed oil composition, but this required liters of oil and was very labor intensive. The application of gas chromatography to fatty acid profile analysis was provided a tool that breeders could use to effectively make changes in the rapeseed oil composition. This technology has been further refined to allow smaller sample sizes, allowing the single seed analysis, and also a half seed technique was also developed and is being utilized too by canola breeders today. In 1970, animal feeding studies being conducted with rapeseed oil suggested a link between erucic acid and fat accumulation in the hearts of skeletal muscles and adrenals of lab rats. This prompted Health Canada to call for a switch to low erucic acid rapeseed varieties as quickly as possible. This shows you that basically erucic acid, which is C22.1, is produced by elongation of 18.1 to 21 to 22.1. Also, animal feeding studies showed on the meal side that this meal can be goitrogenic, especially when fed at higher levels to non-ruminant farm animals due to the presence of the glucosinolates. And if rapeseed meal was going to be competitive with soybean meal, these glucosinolates needed to be reduced. There were two scientists that were foremost in the breeding area at that time. Dr. Keith Downey at the Agriculture Canada Research Station took over responsibilities in '57, and Dr. Balder Stephenson at the University of Manitoba, who started there in '52 breeding soybeans and switched over to canola. I had the great fortune to work with Dr. Stephenson doing my graduate work. Both these programs had access to the traits that were needed to develop the low erucic, low glucosinolate varieties. These were a source of called LIHO, which was the source of low erucic acid, and the low glucosinolates was from a line called Bronowski. And there was a kind of a friendly competition to see who could get first to the low erucic acid varieties and then also to the first double low varieties. Dr. Downey's program at Agriculture Canada in Saskatoon was the first to successfully develop a series of low erucic acid cultivars in both species. Oro, the first in Napus in '68, and Span in Rapa in '71. This just shows a comparison of the fatty acid profiles of the original rapeseeds. So you can see Polish and Argentine had relatively high levels of erucic acid in them. In the new low erucic acid rapeseed, after the block of the elongation step from LIHO, the oleic acid level went up and there was virtually no erucic acid left there. You can see because this went up, there was still desaturation of some of this oleic acid and the linoleic acid went up too. Dr. Stephanson's program at the University of Manitoba is focused on developing the double low types, and he developed the first double low Brassica napus variety, which was Tower in 1974. Dr. Downey's program was successfully developed the first double low form of the Brassica rapa, which is Candle in 1977. The industry needed a new name to distinguish these improvements in the double low rapeseed, and the term canola was trademarked in 1978, and that trademark was transferred to the Canola Council in 1980. Dr. Stephanson and Downey earned themselves a very well earned title of Fathers of Canola, and they shared the Royal Bank Award in 1975 of $50,000. I think if it wasn't for the two of them, we might not be on this Zoom call today. So the technologies that enabled the success of canola were a large number. Breeding, of course, is a paramount and it will always be a very important component of developing new and successful canola varieties, especially the incorporation of disease tolerance is an ongoing challenge for breeders. Initially, the breeders focused on open pollinated varieties, and through the years, seed analytical methodology improved, allowing rapid tools for breeders to make improvements in seed composition, as listed on this slide. With the development of anther and ultimately microspore culture techniques in the 1990s, kudos to Wilf Keller at Ag Canada Ottawa for this one, the breeders gained the ability to rapidly make fixed inbred lines from F1 crosses, a very, very powerful tool. Molecular marker technologies has also become a routine tool for use in breeding of new varieties and hybrids. And this continues to improve with higher throughput and lower cost per data point as the technology advances. I think in canola, because of the large number of quality traits and other traits, disease tolerances, the use of molecular markers and technology is very critical in any breeding program. In the 1980s, the possibility of producing F1 hybrids was investigated by a number of researchers. The significant levels of yield heterosis were observed, and a number of cytoplasmic male sterility systems were explored, and several of them developed. The first hybrids launched in North America were the Hyola hybrids developed by Pacific Seeds in Australia using the Polema CMS system. Today, the Orgura CMS system, which was originally developed by INRA in France, is the CMS system being utilized in canola. And the other hybridization system was developed initially by Plant Genetics Systems, and it's based on using Liberty Link glufosinate tolerance in seed production. And the InVigor hybrids produced using the system also have Liberty Link trait with them. This transition from OPs to hybrids progressed very rapidly once these reliable hybridization systems became available. And the initial breeding in canola was done at public institutions like Ag Canada and University of Manitoba and University of Alberta. But now the breeding is pretty well progressed after the advent of hybrids to the private sector. Another key trait in the enabling the success of canola was the switch to herbicide tolerance. Initially, before and up to 1995, the ag chem products such as Treflan were the main source of herbicides for controlling weeds. Beginning in 1996 and by 2010, a complete changeover from conventional canola to herbicide tolerant varieties was achieved there. And you can see that transition in this chart right here. You can see also the list of the herbicide tolerances available. This chart here shows the growth in acres over the years there. You can see in the recent years, we've been over 20 million acres in canola in Canada. And you can see the key highlights, the first low erucic, double low hybrids, and herbicide tolerance. This chart here shows the increase in yields. It's again progressing upwards, and it seems like the slope has changed to a steeper slope here after the introduction of hybrids and herbicide tolerance. A couple of traits I'd just like to mention that are exciting. They're beyond the regular canola. There's what we call high stability or enhanced oxidative stability canola oil, which is high in oleic, low in linolenic. And this is ideal for high stability applications like frying and consumer packaged goods. This is on the market already. An exciting new oil coming along is canola with these very long chain fatty acids, EPA and DHA, which will have great health benefits that'll be available. Another product that's on the market too now is on the meal side is a high protein, low fiber canola meal. This is closer to soybean meal in terms of protein and fiber content, and thus has higher value, and the level of inclusion in non-ruminant diets can be higher. So one final question here. What two individuals were recognized as the fathers of canola? And I think you all should know that now. They were Dr. Keith Downey and Dr. Baldur Stephenson. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jim Everson, President of the Canola Council, who will give us an update on Canada's canola industry. Welcome, Jim.
Good morning. I'm Jim Everson, President of the Canola Council of Canada. I'm very pleased that you've joined us for this event. It's a call to every one of us to look to the future and to see what's possible and then work together to achieve it. The new Canola Week leverages two of the industry's greatest strengths, innovation and partnership. Innovation is what canola is all about. The crop might not exist today if it weren't for the vision of scientists like Keith Downey and Baldur Stephenson, the fathers of canola. And canola might not be the success that it is today if it were not for the spirit of partnership that moved that vision forward. New generations of scientists have been inspired by Keith's annual canola industry meeting, by Wilf Keller's Canola Innovation Day, and by our Canola Council of Canada's Discovery Forum. And now all three are combined for this year's Canola Week event. Innovation and partnership really are the lifeblood of our industry, and it's as true today as it was 50 years ago. To set the stage, let's focus on where we started from. I'd like to provide a quick update on where Canadian canola is today and where we see the opportunity in the future. As you know, the Canola Council brings the value chain together to strategize and to grow the industry. I want to acknowledge and thank the membership of the Canola Council of Canada for their leadership. At the end of this very strange year, it's impossible to provide an industry update without talking about the global pandemic. Many sectors are looking back and wondering how they could have been better prepared for the unimaginable disruptions that took place in 2020. The canola industry is asking the same questions, but on balance, there's no doubt that we were able to navigate these uncertain times better than many other sectors of the economy. There certainly have been disruptions. Back in March, it wasn't clear whether all parts of our value chain would have access to everything needed to grow the crop, process it, and market it. There were concerns about everything from seed supply in the spring to whether enough bees could cross the border into Canada to pollinate our hybrid crops. In processing plants and handling facilities, our member companies had to adapt quickly their operations to keep employees and communities safe. There was a need for input suppliers to evolve their supply chains and get products to farmers in new ways. But while it's been a hectic and disruptive time, the Canadian canola value chain has kept pace. At a time like this, our strong established partnerships were a real advantage. Through the Canola Council, our industry was able to work with other national commodity groups to advise government officials. Our first order of business was to get the Canadian agri-food sector designated as an essential service and communicate this across the sector and to our global customers. It then became easier to access everything the value chain needed to grow, process, and deliver high-quality products to our customers. Canadian farmers were successful in seeding more than 20 million acres to canola, stewarding the crop through the growing season, and getting it harvested in good time. By most accounts, the transportation system is getting canola to ports and processing plants without too many problems. And even with trade disruptions Canada has been dealing with, demand for Canadian canola remains strong. Seed exports at the beginning of this crop year are very strong, and Canada's processing sector is operating at or near capacity with a very strong export program underway. And so as we look back on 2020, we're looking at a pretty good year, despite all of the uncertainty. For decades, customers have counted on canola to supply Canada to supply high quality canola seed, oil, and meal without interruption. Even these uncertain times, we've shown that their trust in us is really well placed. Now with the crop off the field, it's time to look ahead. What are industry's priorities over the coming months? Well, one of the biggest is our yields. We've averaged 40 to 41 bushels an acre in recent years, and it looks like the 2020 crop will continue this trend. We know we'll need to do better if we want to fully capitalize on global demand for canola, a demand that we're confident will continue to grow. A lot rides on the conclusions you will be drawing in your research and innovation-focused meetings later this week. The Canola Council will continue to focus on how our industry can increase yields on every acre and do so in a sustainable and profitable manner. We also need to keep an unrelenting eye on market access. Across the world, we're seeing increased protectionism, disregard for rules-based trade, and lots of challenges in export markets for us to commercialize seed innovation, like gene editing regulations here in Canada. These are big challenges for Canadian canola, which is so reliant on international markets. Alongside other agricultural stakeholders who drive our economy through trade, we're calling on the federal government to bolster support for market access activities, particularly in Asian markets. We also need to ensure that trade agreements we've signed are implemented as fully as possible, and that our regulatory system in Canada is responsive and positive to innovative strategies. Also important is market diversification, expanding our reach to new customers and new uses for canola. It's tough to do market development work in the current environment with so many travel restrictions, but the Council has been reaching out in new ways, using virtual meetings and virtual trade missions to connect with contacts and partnering with our Canadian trade commissioners in target markets, and we will continue to do so. Another significant opportunity for market diversification is biofuels. I know there's presentations on this later in the week, and really looking forward to it. There's great potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by using canola oil in transportation diesel fuels. Today, approximately 3 million tons of Canadian canola are used annually for biofuel production in Canada, the European Union, and the United States. In Canada, demand could be spurred on by policies aimed at reducing GHG emissions in the transportation sector. Likewise, similar policies in the US are driving significant investment in new biofuels technologies. These are realistic, near-term avenues for canola diversification. All of these goals are linked to one more priority, and that is research. With the canola science community meeting over the rest of the week, it's particularly important, I think, to focus on research and innovation. Now more than ever, we need to maintain our competitive edge through innovation. Because it's so key to our success, all parts of the value chain are heavily invested in research. One of the Canola Council's most important responsibilities is to coordinate and lead many of the research partnerships. Since 1985, we've administered the Canola Agronomic Research Program, which is funded by the 3 provincial grower organizations, Alberta Canola, SAS Canola, and the Manitoba Canola Growers. The focus of this program is research that helps farmers increase yields and profitability. Life science companies also have a substantial stake in canola research. They reinvest on average 10% of their gross sales in R&D to provide growers with innovative products. This strong investment by the private sector is a huge advantage for Canada's canola sector. Part of the Canola Council's role is to seek government funding for canola research and coordinate the partnerships that result. Right now, we're administering more than $12 million in federal research for the Canola Agri-Science Cluster under the Canadian Agriculture Partnership. When combined with contributions from grower organizations and industry, the total investment through this program is more than $20 million over 5 years. It's all focused on growing the economic and environmental benefits of canola by moving us towards an industry strategic goal of 26 million metric tons of sustained canola supply and demand by the year 2025. These programs are successful because all parts of the value chain have input into where the funding will do the most good. There are so many ways to put research dollars to work, and we need your help to make sure we're making the best investment decisions. One of the most important research objectives is to keep increasing the productivity of every acre through improved agronomic practices. There are many underutilized opportunities in this area, and one of the most promising is fertility management, which is the focus of tomorrow's program. Small improvements in the use of nutrients can result in substantial gains. In fact, we estimate Canadian growers can increase yields by an average of 3 bushels an acre through more precise fertility management. Research will help us identify the best practices and then help growers adopt them. Research is also an integral part of our integrated pest management approach. It informs our best practices for production risks such as clubroot and blackleg, and monitors emerging threats such as verticillium stripe and canola flower midge. Beyond agronomy, research plays an important role in our plans to expand the demand for canola. Here, we focus on the qualities that set canola apart from its competitors. For canola oil, that means further enhancements to health benefits and functionality for food processors and restaurants. For meal, it's about differentiating canola meal from competitive canola, rapeseed, and other meals. And it's about the potential that can be tapped by exploring ways to enhance protein content and expand into products for human diets. Science-based evidence is also a powerful tool as we advocate for science-based regulation. For example, there's a need to fill a void in reliable data for public policy decisions related to crop management tools. Here in Canada, the canola value chain has been working diligently to gather data on the impact of neonicotinoids. 2 years ago, the Pest Management Regulatory Agency proposed canceling the use of these products on canola, which is a big concern for the industry because neonic seed treatments are such a vital tool in controlling, particularly flea beetles. In response, the canola value chain coordinated an extensive water monitoring program, showing that the impact of these activities is extremely low. PMRA has recognized the quality and comprehensiveness of the information provided by our industry, and we are continuing to advocate for a science-based decision based on this data. The program has become a model for how these questions can be addressed in the future. And today there's one more compelling reason to keep investing in research and innovation: the pressing need to deal with climate change. We know canola can be a big part of the solution, particularly if we can make bigger inroads in the biofuels industry and can keep advancing the sustainability of our production practices. So for all these reasons, continued investment in research and innovation has never been more essential. However, at this critical time, the future of canola research is likely to be threatened by the competing demands for public funding. Federal spending on research has been stagnant in recent years. As governments wrestle with deficits and with this additional strain of COVID, we're at risk of seeing further declines. That's why it's so important that we keep emphasizing to the Canadian government that it is an essential research partner and that a lot is at stake for the canola industry and for all Canadians. Canola is a powerful driver of our economy and will play a key role in Canada's economic recovery. We know that more research is essential if we are to leverage Canada's advantages through continued innovation. We need to make sure that policymakers know it also. In this era of tight finances, it's also essential that we drive maximum value from available research dollars. We need to keep coming together as an industry to identify the possibilities and the challenges and to determine where research can do the most good, just as Keith Downey urged us to do when he created the canola industry meeting all those years ago. That's why the discussion over the next few days will be really important. The 5-year Canadian Agri-Food Cluster supports significant research funding, and it will expire in 2023. The Canola Council is already preparing for the next policy framework and will be reaching out to all our value chain to identify priorities for research and to coordinate our sector's approach. In closing, I want to congratulate the team that is bringing the industry together this year for Canola Week and especially for doing so successfully and safely in the midst of the global pandemic. Thank you for participating and contributing to this coordinated and collaborative approach. I look forward to the meetings this week and what we can all achieve together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Now we'll have an update on the EU industry and its regulation framework, as well as information from the GCIRC organization presented by Stephan Arens, Managing Director of UFOP, the Union for Promotion of Oil and Protein Crops in Germany.
Hello, everybody. Good morning to the colleagues from Canada, where we normally should sit together and exchange our views. But in the moment, we are far away from normal times. So greetings to Saskatoon on this way. Good evening also to the colleagues from Australia. Thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak about the European perspective in policy, economic, and new developments and technologies. My name is Stephan Arens. I'm the Managing Director of UFOP. UFOP is the Union for the Promotion of Oil and Protein Plants. It is an organization that has been founded 30 years ago and represents the completely processing chain of oilseeds, beginning to the breeders, the farmers, traders within the processors. Yeah, first of all, I want to make a very short view on the markets. I know there are several other presentations with a concrete market issue, but we have some interesting figures also from the European Commission got 2 weeks ago. What is the worldwide situation of oilseeds? We had a little bit of reduced global oilseed outlook, but we are still have a rising worldwide production to a record level of 605 million tons, driven by the soybean production, which is still dominating the market, and also price setting. So that's also an issue for the rapeseed canola sector. It's going to an all-time high of 368 million tons. We have still a strong demand from China, the stocks in Brazil, from feeding material, also from feedstocks almost exhausted. The global rapeseed outlook is a little bit increased, and they are waiting for 69 million tons with Canada and Europe as main producers. In Europe, we have a total oilseed area roughly at 10.6 million hectare. I will say that's a stable production with a small reduction of rapeseed area, but we have a little bit better yields than the year before. But we have a lot of challenges. There's a cap reform going on. We have some issues on plant protection and new breeding technologies. I will come to that back later. The demand side, we have a rising worldwide biofuel production and the demand on feedstocks, especially palm and used cooking oil, UCO. So we have still a market pressure to the European grown oilseeds. But what are the main issues of rapeseed cropping? And I will start naturally in Germany. Last cropping year, we had a acreage about roughly 960,000 hectare after 857,000 hectare in the year before. And you know that all that's still below the acreage potential in Germany because of the dry conditions. It was not the third consecutive year of drought, but yields at 3.5, 3.7 tons a hectare is very far below the genetic potential of the rapeseed in Germany. And you can see it on the right side on the figure, on the picture there. The light red or deep red zones in Germany are lacking of water, still lacking of water. This is a picture of the beginning of November this year. So after a lot of rains, we have still a lack of water in the soil. So these extreme weather events is limiting or are limiting the seeding potential for rapeseed in Germany. We have roughly 1 million hectare seeded in the autumn 2020. So you can also see under this critical conditions, the farmers are still interested in this crop. What are the challenges? And there's the big issue of the European climate change policy. We have the biofuel regulation. We had a reform of the Renewable Energy Directive. It's called RED II, especially with a delegated act by the European Commission to cut out of the market some feedstocks which are causing a high potential of causing indirect land use changes, like palm oil discussed. So that's called high ILUC. So they should cut out of the market until the year to 2030. We have the European Green Deal, which was announced by the European Commission end of 2019, with a really ambitious aim of greenhouse gas neutrality in 2050. So we have rising emissions, we have biomass or the biofuels from biomass actually as the most important factor in the transport sector, but we have also an ongoing debate on the role of biomass in the Green Deal and so on. The European Commission is very critical by the use of biomass in energy and biofuel. So we have to fight for our positions because the biofuel market is the key driver in Germany, in Europe. Germany produces 25% of the European biodiesel. You can see it on the chart on the right side. And we need a lot of imports, you know that all, from all regions. 2/3 of the German rapeseed production is processed to biofuels. And there's no alternative market in the moment to bring in this volume of biodiesel to have the same direction of stabilizing prices. And you know that all biofuel production is strongly connected to the supply of domestic rapeseed meal. And have a look at the feedstock use in biofuels in the European market. And sorry, I got this really new figure 2 days before, and I had no chance to translate it in English. So you can see it, but also by the fields, by the colors, the European rapeseed is the most important feedstock for biofuels in Europe, but it's losing a little bit of importance. We had 46% in 2016, and now we have 38% in 2019. What is rising? That's the sector of the used cooking oil. It's here called Einspeisefette. It's used cooking oil like it is. Because of several regulations in several countries, double counting, so it makes it very attractive for the biofuel producers, for the mineral companies. Palm is only 1 point up to 30%. And if you look at the countries, Italy, Spain, and Netherlands imported palm as feedstock number 1 for its biofuel production. Germany and France are still going with rapeseed oil. What are the other challenges with hard, deeply impact on the global trade prices and farmers' income to the rapeseed sector? And I mentioned it before, we have the ongoing negotiations on the CAP reform. I think we can expect this will end in the spring of 21, and then we'll start the national implementation. So we will have a new regulation in 23. We have a new green structure that was addressed by the European Commission to meet, at the one hand, the climate change, and on the other hand, creating better environmental care from the Commission's view. There are several elements. I don't want to go too deep here, but there are elements as non-protected areas and also to create eco schemes. And these eco schemes are also a possibility for flowering crops like the rapeseed to get more importance in the crop rotation systems, because we have to think more on new, wider crop rotation models with new elements in the crop rotations to meet the challenges of the climate change. We have actually an unclear situation that what impact will be on this farm to fork strategy from the European Commission. what was addressed to reduce plant protection, to reduce fertilizer use. What will be the impact on this actual negotiations? I cannot say it in a moment, but the European Commission makes a lot of pressure. In Germany, we have a protein crop strategy, including the support of non-GM soy as part of a European strategy of more homegrown protein. It's called the protein strategy. Then, sure, you all have heard about, we have several trade wars in several regions of the world, which have an impact of soybean on the soybean and rapeseed market. And in the first row, the US-China problems. And we have also a trade war between Canada and China and several other regions. So let me see after the election in the US what development will come to the world market. We have to think about a reform of the WTO to create unique trade possibilities. And we have from the European side trade negotiations with Mercosur, ASEAN, etc. And we asked the question whether the agri products standing here in the first row. I think in the first row are standing the industrial products, the chemical products. So let me see what's coming out of this. What are further issues? And then we can ask what's in the future toolbox of the farmers. We have in Germany, we have a new fertilizer regulation to reduce the nitrogen impact on the soil and the groundwater. And it's strongly related also to the output of the animal sector, which has been used in the arable crop sector. We have a massive debate on plant protection. You have heard about the ban of the neonics, the possible ban of the glyphosate, etc. And this is based on insect protection campaigns in Germany. Yes, there are a strong public discussion about using chemicals in agriculture. So what are the outcomes from the farmers? There's no neonic seed treatment. So we need additional sprayings on the fields with chemicals who are not so effective like they have been before. We have more and more old chemicals running out of the market because of European regulations. And we have only a small number of new active ingredients coming out of the approval procedure. So the market is getting smaller and smaller. And as last point, we have the regulation of the new breeding technologies. We have the situation that we had a Nobel Prize winning Ms. Charpentier on this the finding of the CRISPR-Cas. Strong discussion in Europe and also in Germany about the use of such technology. And there are several organizations, NGOs, are claiming to rule them in the same way like the GM. And then we cannot use it anymore, but we have to use it. We need these technologies to meet all these challenges. And what are the perspectives? And UFOP is committed to the future rapeseed cultivation on 1.2 million hectares. You can see that's a little bit more that we have today, but it's not the highest potential that we had in the past. But 1.2 million hectares are 10% of German arable land. And if you think about the wider crop rotation systems, then it should be possible to implement 1.2 million hectares of rapeseed. And another rapeseed, what we see is another 1.2 million hectares also have seen for the protein crops like soy, peas, beans, sweet lupins, and so on. If you think about rapeseed yields, normally over 4 tons a hectare, you can expect in German production about 5 million tons. So we have a lot of challenges to meet these expectations. For the total crop production, we are not only on the rapeseeds influenced by these challenges, especially to find new crop protection methods, and we have to meet the climate change possibilities. So we have also besides the biofuel sector, we see very interesting developments for edible oil in the field of food processing or human nutrition. In the first row, the partial replacing of palm oil as food ingredient by rapeseed oil. We have a project called oleogel to give the rapeseed a new texture so that it could be used in cookies or cakes, so getting more importance by the food processing industry. And there are several organizations working on the extraction of high protein for the direct human use. And so there are very interesting market, but in the case of the high protein, we have high, it's very expensive in the moment, so we have to work on it. But in the end, the biofuel market will stay important driver for the rapeseed market. In the case of stabilizing this market, we don't see increasing possibilities on the biofuel market, but we want to stabilize it. And we see, for example, several potential in the use of plant-based fuels in agricultural machinery. But in the end, we need another additional markets to use this rapeseed products also in future. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's happening on this conference, on this Canola week. So thank you very much for your attentions, and I'm looking forward for your question.
Our next speaker is Thomas Mielke, Executive Director of ISTA Mielke, the publishers of Oil World. He will bring us up to date on what's ahead for the world's oil markets.
Dear participant, it is a great honor for me to be invited to this canola industry meeting and present latest oil world forecasts of the global supply, demand, and price outlook of oilseeds and products, and how this is going to influence Canadian canola. Worldwide, edible oil and oil meal prices virtually exploded in the past few weeks. Despite corona-related consumption losses, world supplies are tight in soybeans, sunflower, palm, as well as in rapeseed and canola. The average edible oil prices, as well as the average oil meal prices expressed in the price indices, are currently almost 40% above the latest 5-year average. Most oilseeds, oils and meals have rallied to 6-year highs recently. Futures prices of soybeans and products established new contract highs on the Chicago Board of Trade during the past 2 weeks in response to lower than expected supplies, record US exports, and a prospective steep decline in US soybean stocks at the end of this season. The US soybean production has turned out lower than expected. Crop concern in South America is adding to the bullishness. Rapidly rising soybean and soya oil prices have pulled up canola prices in Canada and rapeseed prices in Europe. And currently, soybeans are offered at a premium to rapeseed in Rotterdam, which is an unusual occurrence. Prices of Canadian canola are largely determined by world market developments, primarily of palm and soya. This slide summarizes world production. And we really see the upswing in palm and in soya. Today, Palm oil accounts for about 32% of world production of all oils and fats. Soya oil, 25%. The market share of rapeseed and canola is a combined 11%. My company, ISTA Mielke, was founded by my late father Siegfried Mielke more than 60 years ago. International, statistical, agricultural information. We are providing statistics and forecasts on production, trade, consumption, stocks, and prices worldwide. Independent, not involved in trading, unbiased. I am proud to be the leader of a dedicated team of analysts. We provide a variety of reports, a daily flash, the weekly, the monthly, and many more. You are invited to test any of our reports free of charge for 3 weeks if you are not yet familiar with our services. Let us look at the major fundamentals of soybeans, oil, and meal. The global dependence on US soybeans will be record high this season, primarily as a result of a shortfall in South American exports by about 13 to 14 million tons in September-December. The US has to compensate this. We have also seen higher Canadian soybean exports recently. For the full season, we expect US soybean exports to reach at least 60 million tons, but probably they will rise to 61 or 62 or 63 million, which would draw down US stocks to critically low levels. China suffered a major cutback in oilseed crushings and oil meal consumption as a result of the African swine fever. This was in 2018-19. Now, oil meal consumption is almost back on trend. Soybean crushings are rising and may approach 98 million tons this season. Pig numbers have recovered significantly. In July, December 2020, pork production is now likely to grow by 10%, probably more, and further growth is ahead for 2021. Oil meal consumption this season is likely to rise by 6 million tons or 7% in China. Most of this increase will be satisfied by rising crushings of soybeans. We expect oil meal imports to remain close to the record level of last season. Imports of rapeseed and canola meal together probably 1.8 million tons to 1.9 million tons in the current season. Within the past 3 months, the global soybean balance turned from surplus to tightness. The US crop was revised downward by 2.7 million tons to 113.5 for this year. In South America, we already made a downward revision by 4 million tons during the past 6 weeks, but our current estimate is probably still too high for Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. Today, I would not be surprised if the Brazilian crop turns out below 130 million. Rainfall in September, October, and November was sharply below normal. The worst drought in at least 30 years. Beneficial rains are now in the forecast for next week. December rainfall are crucial. If they are not well spread and at least close to normal, a crop failure in South America cannot be prevented. Very critical situation. For the US, we anticipate record exports and crushings in 2020-21. And as a result of that, stocks are falling to a 7-year low. It is even possible that the stocks will be reduced even further to bare minimum levels of 3 million tons or less if soybean exports and crushings will be increased further in response to lower than currently expected South American production. Worldwide, there is an increasing dependence on soya, oil, and meal in the current season. We estimate that world consumption of soya meal will rise by 2.7 million tons, compared with 0.8 million ton growth last season. Demand shifts from sunflower oil, insufficient supplies of palm oil and rapeseed oil will result in higher requirements for soybean oil. In the case of soybean meal, or in the case of oil meals, soybean meal has to cover virtually all of the growth in oil meal requirements because production of all other oil meals combined will be virtually flat. The big question is, will soybean supplies be sufficient to allow a significant increase in soybean crushings in the next 12 months? And these are our current forecasts here. We estimate world soybean crushings to rise by 12 to 13 million tons. This creates a global production deficit in the second consecutive year. At the moment, we expect world stocks to decline by 3 million tons from a year earlier to 93.9 million at the end of August. But in case of additional South American crop losses, which have become more likely recently, the stocks would fall even further. Now let us look at the other major oilseeds. World production of 9 oilseeds other than soybeans are seen declining by 1 to 2 million tons this season from the 224 million produced last season. Biggest losses in sunflower seed, a moderate drop in cottonseed, some recovery in rapeseed, as well as in groundnuts, palm kernels, and copra. Market participants were surprised by the magnitude of the decline in sunflower seed production this year. The drought in July-September 2020 severely damaged the crop in the Black Sea region. Russia down 2.3 million tons, Ukraine down 2.2 million tons, probably more. Overall, world sunflower seed production down sharply by 5.2 million tons. This is resulting in significant declines in crushings as well as in world production of sunflower oil and meal, and demand shifts in other commodities. This also partly explains the boost in Canadian canola crushings and exports we have seen so far this season. Demand shifts from sunflower. Rapeseed and canola production has been on a declining trend during the past 7 years. This year, we have seen a recovery, but the declining trend is not yet broken. We expect world production in 2020-21 to rise by 2.4 million tons, with biggest increases in India and Australia. Low production in the European Union, only 17 million tons in the second consecutive year, compared with interior requirements in the European Union of 23 to 24 million tons, and therefore significantly higher import requirements in Europe. In Australia, harvesting is still going on, larger than expected yields. So far, we expect the canola crop at 3.8 million tons, a 4-year high. Exports are increasing to Europe mainly, but also to China and other countries. World trade in rapeseed and canola is approaching a new high of 17 million tons this season. For the European Union, import requirements are likely to rise to 6.3, 6.4 million tons. Most of that has to be imported from Ukraine, Canada, and Australia. Ukrainian export supplies are already largely shipped. The European Union is now mainly dependent on Canada and Australia. Prices of Canadian canola have increased sharply, making it less attractive at the moment to ship to the European Union. This is likely to be resolved by the market either by appreciating European prices of rapeseed and products, or by some temporary setback in Canada. We are also expecting higher imports of rapeseed and canola in China. Latest trade data showed bigger than anticipated arrivals in September and October. We also expect higher imports into Mexico and the United Arab Emirates, probably also Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now look at palm oil. Prices have skyrocketed. Indonesian palm oil prices are currently at around $870, an appreciation of 40% or $250 from a year ago. This clearly shows how tight the situation is in Southeast Asia. World production of palm oil has dropped by 4.5 million tons in October-September 2019-20, with biggest reductions in Indonesia and Malaysia. Surprisingly small production in Indonesia in July-September. Current stocks are unusually low despite corona-related losses in consumption. Reasons for the reduced production: lagged effects of dry weather last year, lagged effects of fertilizer application when prices were low, shortage of foreign workers leading to production losses at the plantations, and lack of replanting creating an aging age profile of the oil palms with lower potential yields. For next season, we expect palm oil production to rebound, but the rebound will be relatively limited. Concluding statements. First, soya meal prices have exploded in the past 3 months. Soybean crushings worldwide cannot be raised sufficiently, mainly due to the problems in Argentina, the world's largest exporter of soybean meal. Prices of canola meal and of other oil meals followed soybean meal higher. Third, profitability of livestock production has declined. There is the risk that consumption will be reduced, which could have a dampening impact on meal prices, but probably only from February onward. Second, the outlook for major vegetable oils. For the first time, world production and consumption declined last season. Current stocks are unusually low and are projected to stay comparatively low in 2021. Stocks are low in many producing and importing countries, with the exception of China, where the government decided to build reserve stocks. There are many uncertainties ahead. Weather in South America, the pace of recovery in palm oil output, biodiesel policies. Will mandates be reduced due to the high prices of vegetable oils? Effects of the current high prices on consumption in oil and meal, some negative effects. And finally, how quickly can the COVID pandemic be brought under control globally? We currently expect prices of soya oil, palm oil, and sun oil to remain supported and probably appreciate further in early 2021. This should spill over to canola and provide attractive selling opportunities for canola farmers. The surplus in Canadian canola stocks will be disposed in the current season. Canadian stocks will be relatively small at the end of this season. This should have a price supportive influence on prices. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings me to the end of my presentation. Details of global supply and demand fundamentals were released in the November monthly, which can be obtained from the website. Again, I express my thanks for the invitation to talk to you, and I will be happy to respond to your questions later. Thank you very much.
Coming up is an interview by Brian Ennis, Vice President of Public Affairs at the Canola Council, with Kathleen Donohue, Director General of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's Market Access Secretariat. The topic is market access for canola and trade with China.
Well, today we're joined by Kathleen Donohue, who is the Director General of the Market Access Secretariat at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Kathleen comes to this role with a wealth of experience working for the Government of Canada, both in Ottawa as well as around the world, including most recently in India. So she has a great wealth of experience to bring government together to help solve market access issues and really help the agriculture sector continue to export our products around the world. So for the next few minutes, we'd like to have a short discussion around what the Government of Canada is doing in today's world of market access, including what's going on with canola in China. Kathleen, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Brian. Good to be with you. Well, it's been almost 8 years now, Kathleen, since the Canola Council launched its market access strategy. And since then, we've certainly seen a lot evolve in the world of market access. Over the last few weeks, we've had a number of informative focus groups at the Canola Council on how we can focus our efforts to achieve the most results given what we're facing in the world. We're set to launch our revitalized plan in early 2021. And the Government of Canada has also seen a lot evolve in the world of market access. So I'd like to ask Kathleen, how has the way market access and trade has evolved in the world? How has this affected government's work to help the industry with market access issues?
Sure, Brian. Certainly trade and market access has evolved since the CCC launched its first plan. The sector has been able to grow significantly in the past 8 years under the various plans that it's developed. But the current hurdles in some markets, may require the CCC to take a new approach and to kind of redirect maybe some of its efforts, some of its actions. Canada's canola oil and meal export values, have been growing in an overall, global market, largely driven by China. And canola seed exports, certainly, declined slightly in the overall global market, as well as China, as we know, given some of the recent disruptions over the last, 18 months, 2 years. Europe, though, has seen some regional growth. And so, I think kind of as you kind of look forward, I think success, perhaps, simply stated, is around, I think, a couple of keys. One would be collaboration. I think we need to work together, federal, provincial governments, the industry, to be able to leverage the full potential of the sector and its strengths in the international market. We also need to look at opportunities for diversification. And I think this is where we need a thoughtful, robust approach to diversification to be able to tackle some of our current challenges. So I think as the CCC looks to revitalize its plan, these are probably two areas where I would like to see, maybe some focus. I think, if you take a step back and you look at our top exports, they're characterized by a high level of concentration across some specific markets. And also, there's certain key commodities such as canola that's highly concentrated and reliant on certain key markets. So I think there's a recognized need to identify alternative export destinations and risk mitigation strategies where we might see, a heightened risk, and to develop a bit of a concerted approach in terms of reflecting and looking at opportunities to diversify, and therefore, the aim of reducing our exposure in one or two key markets. Having said that, though, it's a tough challenge, right? Because I think getting the balance right is important. Obviously, we can't ignore certain, key markets. You also can't ignore the increased number of non-tariff barriers that the agricultural sector as a whole has been challenged with over the last few years. And I think the same, is true in terms of the industry at large. And what I mean by that is, I think there's a need to collaborate and to look at collectively how and where we need to perhaps focus a greater amount of our energy into diversification, into those markets that demonstrate future promise, future growth.
Thanks, Kathleen. You did mention China, and I think we're all aware of the challenges that we have faced with China over the years, including most recently on canola seed. I'm interested from your perspective across the agriculture portfolio. As I say, China's been a major focal point for us in market access. But what's the current outlook for market access for Canadian agri-food products in China more broadly?
Sure, Brian. I mean, certainly the current context with China I'd say, you know, agriculture is particularly vulnerable to non-tariff barriers to trade. And that, you know, frankly puts market access of Canadian exports at risk, and you know, adding significant costs and uncertainty for Canadian exporters, for Canadian producers. In that context, you know, the official actions by China impacting our ag trade have been limited to canola seed officially. However, we know other Canadian agricultural products to China, such as soybeans, peas, beef and pork, have certainly been affected by heightened attention by Chinese officials. You know, we continue to see as well delays and overall, I'd say, you know, lack of engagement by Chinese authorities. And it is impacting our progress, you know, in terms of the ongoing sort of trade issues, but also in terms of progress around achieving new market access and sort of, you know, the timely kind of management of requests for new access. So, you know, for example, we know the sector is very interested in securing new market access for pulses, as well as for raw oats. And that's something, you know, that Canada is interested in, given the demand projections coming out of China. We did submit a risk assessment questionnaire back in 2018, and to date, China has yet to provide an update on that submission. Of course, you know, China represents a key market for the Canadian agricultural sector. However, the unpredictability of the market puts our exporters at risk, puts our producers at risk, and I think, you know, highlights the need for both our government and for industry to continue to work together to diversify export markets, to be able to better weather these trade disruptions.
Well, lots going on in China. We've got about 5 minutes left in our presentation, Kathleen. More specific to canola, what's the current state of market access for canola seed to China?
Well, you know, I would say, Brian, that, you know, restoring access for the 2 suspended companies is a top priority for the government of Canada. In 2019, you know, Canadian canola seed exports were valued at just over 800 million, you know. And so that represented a 71% decline from 2018 numbers. And while this year has seen a slight increase, we certainly have not seen the return of those 2018 levels. So again, restoring access is important. China has yet to lift the suspension of the 2 Canadian companies in terms of their ability to export seed to China. Earlier this summer, Canada delivered a comprehensive report to China, which included scientific findings to support the reinstatement of those 2 suspended companies. It's our understanding that China continues to review that investigative report. In the meantime as well, on April 1st, 2020, so back in the spring, China did implement a new requirement of less than 1% dockage levels for all canola seed shipments to China. So I think it's important, you know, moving forward that we continue to work closely with industry to advance our export interests.
Well, we'll finish with the last question here, Kathleen, and I know it's something you've been involved with the Chinese particularly, as well as regulators around the world. For many in the seed development community, one of the biggest challenges clouding the future is how plant breeding innovation, such as gene editing, will be regulated in export markets. For example, in canola, there's already gene-edited canola being grown in the United States commercially, and we can't grow that here in Canada because it's not approved in our export markets. And a lot's changed, of course, with China and other countries since 2 years ago when we were speaking with Chinese regulators about biotechnology and the challenges of bringing new innovations to market when there are differences around the world. I'd like to understand what you're seeing in this space. So when you look at technology and food and market access with countries like China, Japan, and the EU, what would shed some light around how gene-edited canola in Canada could be commercialized and we could export that around the world?
Yes, I mean, certainly, Brian, in the last couple of years, we've observed an increase in just in terms of the international dialogue on this topic. And I think, more and more countries are turning their attention to modernizing their regulatory or policy, frameworks to be able to clarify the requirements for products of gene editing. And in order to commercialize and trade gene editing products, clarity and transparency surrounding policies, surrounding the requirements on products of gene editing is essential, especially for some of those key markets that we export to. So, most countries determine whether a product will need pre-market safety assessments based on, technology used to create it. Many are grappling with how to fit products of many new and emerging technologies into their regulatory framework. So for the most part, countries are adding policies or they're adding regulations that are based on, end product, irrespective of the technology used to create it, to determine if a product requires oversight. And I'd say that, at this stage, certain trends seem to be emerging. However, differences do exist in terms of regulatory triggers and what information is required by relevant authorities. So, Canada has been closely monitoring developments on the international stage. We are also very much engaged both bilaterally, multilaterally, to be able to advocate a pragmatic approach to compliance, recognizing that many products of gene editing are indistinguishable from their conventional counterparts. And I think that's key. We've also been following very closely the developments, for example, in Europe, in the EU, in light of the European Court of Justice decision that all products of new breeding techniques, including products of gene editing, are to be regulated as GMOs. So, back just this past October, in fact, last month, Canada, EU held a biotech dialogue that's under our CETA agreement. And during those meetings, the European Commission confirmed that it's on track to publish later on this spring, in April 2021, a study on the impact of current regulations on products of new breeding techniques. And, the consultations for this study have been wide-ranging, touching a number of areas from research and development, benefits, risks, ethical aspects, labeling, implementation, as well as enforcement. So, we do anticipate that once this EU study is published, it's going to have significant impact on the global landscape for these products. And, I think kind of stepping back from sort of, that, I think overall though, it's going to be obviously really important that we ensure Canadian exporters are aware of requirements going forward, able to demonstrate that our exports meet the requirements by importing countries. And I think, overall sort of stewardship in terms of our commercialization landscape and trading of gene editing products is going to be key. We're going to have to develop strategies to ensure that, we remain compliant while we continue to obviously advocate.
Well, certainly a challenging area, but one with a lot of opportunity. Kathleen, is there anything else you'd like to add today?
No, I think, Brian, I'll just simply say that it's a pleasure to be with you today. Really look forward to the revitalization plan in 2021. And, I know the last couple of years has been perhaps a bit more challenging on the canola front. And, we continue to look to work with you, with your organization to find solutions moving forward. So thanks very much for allowing me this opportunity today.
And thanks for joining us, Kathleen. We appreciate all the work that you and your colleagues at the Government of Canada do and to help us resolve market access issues and prevent them from occurring wherever we can in the future. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
How can we increase the value of canola meal? Brittany Dyck, the Canola Council Senior Manager for the Canola Utilization Portfolio, is here to update us on this topic.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me today. I'm really excited to be joining the Canola Week and be part of your program. My hats off to the organizers of the event this week. I know shifting gears and doing things virtually is it's not easy, but I think it's really worth it to keep the industry coming together and keeping us convened. So my name is Brittany Dyck. I work with the Canola Council, and I've been there for about 8 years now, and have spent the majority of my time really focused on canola meal promotion, research, some regulatory issues. And so looking forward to sharing some of that insight with you today. We're going to go through the top markets for canola meal, understand how they're used in those markets and what the future opportunities look like given our strategic plans for 26 million metric tons of production. I'm going to briefly run through some research highlights for you, and also give you some information on some of the Canola Council's promotional efforts and what we're doing in those markets to drive utilization and value. So I'll start off here with the Statistics Canada information for canola meal exports for the last decade. There are about 3 things I want to focus on when we look at this graph here. And the first one I think to highlight is that just look at the size and scale of our industry and how it has expanded here over the last decade. We've really gone from 2.5 million tons of exports all the way up past 4.5 million tons of exports. So significant growth from our industry. I'd also like to point out that we have kind of an interesting dynamic here between the United States and China. You can see starting in 2013 to 2015, the red bar here, which is China, disappears for a few years and then really comes back to be quite a significant and important market for us. And so just to give you some information on what happened in these 3 years, canola meal and our processors in Canada had to undergo a registration process with China's Ministry of Agriculture. That process was not unique to canola meal. It was a requirement for feed exporters exporting product into to China. And so it did take our industry several years to work through that process. And we were reliant on the United States during that time. Since 2016, China has been a very important market and a high value market for our product. And we've actually seen some of the market share from the United States be taken away as the demand to China has really been strong. And the third point is really to highlight that the United States and China do represent a very significant volume of the total exports. In 2019, that was 99% of all we exported. Small volumes do go to some other countries. So there are other markets that are of importance to our industry. And we do, as a Canola Council and as an industry at large, we work to promote canola meal in those markets and to kind of continue to understand those dynamics. So Thailand and Vietnam would be 2 markets in Asia that have demand for canola meal. And in some years receive it from Canada, and in other years are receiving more via the export of canola seed to the UAE, which then subsequent canola meal is exported to those countries. So in those countries, we do work to really make sure that the industry knows the product that they have, that it is a Canadian origin, as we know that there are other rapeseed meal products in that marketplace that are not always of consistent quality or the quality of our Canadian product. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight that we have Canada as our 3rd largest market of importance, and at times has been our number 2 market. So there's about 500,000 tons of canola meal that stays here in Canada every year and is used very diversely across our livestock industry. So now I wanted to go into the US and China and just talk a bit more in depth. So what I have here is the United States with the red states are the top 10 dairy producing states, And the gold stars are where canola meal is exported to, our top markets. And so they very closely align with the United States dairy industry. So that just reaffirms that our canola meal is going into the dairy industry in the United States. Now, California is, of course, our main market here. We see about 1.3 million tons of canola, give or take, going to this market that has more than 1.5 million dairy cows in that state alone. And so if we just look at exports into that state, or exports to that state, and the number of cows, we know that usage per cow of canola meal is very high. So California is unique. We've got just a great logistical system that allows for large quantities of product to go to California, and an industry that has been made well aware of the benefits of canola meal. If you go to the other side of the country and you go to the upper Midwest, states such as Wisconsin, where we have large populations of dairy cows and less canola meal volume going in, we see usage per cow is not substantial. It's quite, in fact, quite a bit lower than what we see in California. These are very different industries, different herd sizes, different feed mill structures, different availability of high quality feed ingredients. And so we know that those situations are not identical in any means. And so we see that area as some potential growth for canola meal, but it is not the same, or not equal. So there are some challenges there. Moving on to China. So what I have for you here, you can see the yellow balloons. These represent the provinces in China that receive Canadian canola seed and are also very much aligned with where canola meal exports go as well. So you have both of those dynamics of the seed that goes as well as the meal that goes. And what we know is that those provinces that we've specified here are very much involved in high amounts of aquaculture feed production. And a stat I found from a few years back, so don't quote me on this, has about 40% of China's aquaculture feed production occurring in those provinces. So we know that canola meal is used extensively by species such as carp and tilapia. What we also know is that the dairy industry that is in the north is really not logistically close to canola meal. We know that usage of canola meal is not great. And so we do see that there is some opportunity for canola meal to really expand in this market. But we see it as being a very targeted approach towards really promoting the use. So otherwise, the dairy industry is very large. We don't have the ability to supply it all, but we can see this being an opportunity, and we are working in this space quite actively. Now, just to remind everyone, we have our utilization targets of 14 million metric tons of processing by the year 2025. So that significant growth in processing means significant additional volumes of canola meal. That's at least 2 million tons more than what we currently have. And that, so we need to look at those opportunities. We see opportunities for canola oil and diversification through biofuels. And we also need to look, or continue to look at how that looks for canola meal. So I've spoken about different opportunities in China, in the US, in Asia, where definitely there's opportunities for canola meal use, but we also have some exciting research going on the use of canola protein for human use. So lots on the horizon for canola meal as well. Very quickly here, I wanted to just speak to the research that we have seen over the past decade on canola meal that's funded through Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada in partnership with the Canola Council and the provincial grower associations as well. So we see more milk, and everyone knows this. We've talked about dairy cows fed canola meal produce more milk, extra liter per cow per day. But we have new data that shows that in certain stages of the cow's production cycle, you get even more milk production. We see some research coming out on reduced methane emissions when cows are fed canola meal versus other protein ingredients. That's coming out of AAFC Sherbrooke, as well as in the United States. We see nitrogen use efficiency. This means that less nitrogen is excreted, and consistent quality of our products. Just a note on canola meal use in other species. We know it's well suited for all livestock species, and we know that previously restrictions on how canola meal is used has been discredited. We know we can use significant amounts of canola meal, and we can do so in various different stages of production for various species. So just some really great research continues to come out. And finally, I wanted to highlight our canola meal promotion efforts. So we do deliberate promotion work. A lot of that happens in the United States and China, Vietnam, Thailand, a little bit in Mexico, as well in Canada. So we're really getting technical information out, and that is the research that I mentioned previously. And so we do this through our agri-marketing program that we have in conjunction with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada as well. So a few different other channels: LinkedIn, WeChat, canolamazing.com if you want more information. And we're continuing to build relationships virtually through the 2020 year and into 21. We will continue to connect as best we can. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you. That's my email address if you have any questions. And of course, I'll be around for the question and answer period coming up as well. Thanks, everyone.
Oilseed processing is one of the most important rural-based industries in Canada. Chris Everett, Executive Director of the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association, will update us on developments in this sector of the industry.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Vervaet. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association. On behalf of COPA and the Canola Council, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning to provide a short update on oilseed processing in Canada. What I thought I could do for the course of the next 10 minutes is to kind of take a page out of what we do internally when it comes to doing a quick review or overview of our sector. And what we do internally at the Canola Council is we do something called an environmental scan, where we kind of look at the current lay of the land for the industry. We look into what we see around the corner for the next 12 months. And then we do a little further kind of crystal ball gazing in terms of what we see as possible opportunities or challenges in the industry going out 24 months and beyond. So going back about a year, just rounding out 2019, at the end of December, we did record as an oilseed processing industry another record crush for canola. At the end of 2019, it was 9.6 million metric tons. So things were looking pretty good going into 2020, but we really got things off to a pretty rocky start in 2020, where we saw pipeline protests across rail lines in Canada. This really presented a huge potential risk for our sector, but really for, frankly, the entire Canadian economy, as there's so many different industries that are reliant on rail. Oilseed processing really being no different, as 80 to 90% of everything that's produced at the facilities in Canada does rely on rail to get product to market. So there was a lot of potential risk associated with this blockade, a situation that occurred in the early parts of 2020. Although there was some impact, the situation was resolved so that the impact wasn't overly pronounced for oilseed processors. But I do want to take this opportunity to provide at least a shout out to the railways for bouncing back quite quickly in terms of providing service and getting capacity back up and running, because this situation certainly could have caused a massive problem for the entire industry throughout 2020. After putting the rail blockades in the rearview mirror, members were ready for a productive 2020. But then, of course, COVID happened, and members needed to pivot quickly and react quickly to the changing landscape as a result of COVID. The first steps taken by COPA members was to implement health and safety protocols across all the facilities in Canada to ensure the health and safety of employees and ensure the operability of the plants could be maintained. What we also saw happen was quick shifting of the supply chains in North America, really globally, but from a North American perspective, what we saw happen was a lot more oil move from food service applications to food processing and retail. The lockdowns and the closure or half capacity of restaurants and hotels certainly meant a lot less demand for food service, and more was being funneled into both food processing and retail. The impact on food service also spilled over into the availability of feedstock in biofuel markets. So the used cooking oil used in biodiesel was in scarcer supply. So there was an ability for canola oil to fill that void, and more canola oil was indeed sold as a feedstock in biofuel production in North America. What we also saw through most of this year as well is continued solid demand for offshore shipments. So that continued at a relatively brisk pace. So trending into the final months here in 2020, we do envision that oilseed processing for canola will reach a record volume of 10 million metric tons by the end of this year. So despite all the challenges of COVID, members were able to react quickly to the changing landscape, maintain operations, and take advantage of fluid supply chains to continue to ship and to sell product to North American and global customers. So this really is a testament to the resiliency of our sector, farmers, and really the entire canola value chain. The industry, of course, is taking nothing for granted going into 2021, with COVID still very much hanging over everyone's heads. The demand and supply chains will really remain unpredictable in a COVID environment. And over the next 12 and maybe over the next 24 months, the industry has started to ask itself a couple of questions with regards to what does a post-COVID environment mean for our industry? And we would submit, at least as we talk today, that a post-COVID environment still brings a certain level of uncertainty in terms of what do the markets look like in a post-COVID environment. So for example, what will be the state of the global economy? Having all these lockdowns and essentially economic pauses or shutdowns in some cases, what does that mean for the state of the global economy overall? Do we see food service bounce back to pre-COVID levels? Food service is an enormous part of the oilseed processing business. And can we continue to rely on food processing and retail products in terms of maintaining demand for canola oil? Have fundamental consumption habits started to change in a post-COVID environment? Are people going to travel less? Are we going to see entertainment venues and activities change as well? So think sporting events or concerts. Are they still going to be in the same type of a scale that we were familiar with before COVID happened? So our industry really doesn't have answers to any of these questions, but these are some of the questions that come to mind in terms of what do we need to start thinking about or being prepared for even after we see an end of COVID. Something else that we're looking for or keeping on our radar over the next 12 months is the US political dynamics. I'm not going to spend a lot of time speaking to US political dynamics, only just to mention that, of course, the US is our most important market. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention it in terms of something that we need to keep in the back of our minds with regards to any sort of policy direction that the United States takes on issues that are important to oilseed processing and to the entire canola sector. So as I close out the presentation here, I'm going to talk about what we see is the biggest driver of canola oil demand going over into the next 24 months and beyond. And it's really about biofuels. We do, as an industry, think biofuels has the potential to grow our industry more than anything else has really over the last decade or two. And this is largely due to the decarbonization policies that are in full swing across the globe, and the fact that the low carbon transportation fuels are featuring prominently in a lot of these different decarbonization policies that are rolling out. This slide is just to give everybody an example of what I mean when I say that decarbonization policies hold tremendous potential for demand in biofuels and vegetable oils and canola oil in particular. What we see happening in the US is quite remarkable, and I like to characterize it as a biofuel renaissance. And it's really being driven by the California market. So in California, they have something called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard, which does mandate lower carbon intensities of the fossil fuels that are consumed in that state. And to do that, to meet those lower carbon intensities, biofuels are being blended into diesel at remarkable volumes over the last decade. So when you look at the left-hand side of the slide, you will see that the growth in biofuel consumption in California really has been quite remarkable over the last decade as a result of their low carbon fuel standard. We actually see the consumption doubling, more than doubling, in fact, over the last decade. And there has been a clear market response in terms of biofuel production capacity in the United States. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you will see a chart that demonstrates the build out of renewable diesel capacity in the United States over the last number of years, and really the explosion that is right around the corner with regards to renewable diesel production capacity going into 2021, 22, and all the way up to 2024. What we see happening in the States over the next 3 or 4 years alone is a tripling or a quadrupling of renewable diesel production capacity. And again, much of that is to fill the demand that is coming out of California. At the moment, the canola industry does not have access to the renewable diesel market. Currently, there's not what we call a canola approved pathway for renewable diesel. So this has become one of the top priorities of the Canola Council, is to work with the US government and our industry partners in the United States to get a pathway approved so we can start to take advantage of that surge in demand that we see coming over the next 3 or 4 years. So opportunities in biofuels is not limited to just the United States. When we look at Canada, we actually ask ourselves the question, is Canada on the verge of its own biofuel renaissance? And the answer at the moment is maybe. We have something at the moment that is being proposed by the federal government called the Clean Fuel Standard, a very similar type of policy in terms of the low carbon fuel standard in California, mandating lower carbon intensities of fossil fuels burnt and consumed in Canada. We really do see potential in the Clean Fuel Standard to replicate what we see unfolding in the United States. But the caveat is we need to see the Clean Fuel Standard being designed properly and really rewarding canola's low carbon advantages and low carbon intensities, and canola's sustainability as well. If we get those pieces right, we do feel that the Clean Fuel Standard could be a significant driver of biofuels domestically in Canada, and also for demand in feedstock. When you look at the chart on this particular slide, it gives you an idea of what we think is possible with the Clean Fuel Standard. By 2030, we could see renewable and biodiesel consumption reach nearly 3 million liters, and we could see an additional 1.5 million metric tons of canola oil required to meet that demand. So when we talk about an additional 1.5 million metric tons of canola oil required, we're talking about at least the need for 2 to 3 new plants to fill that type of demand. So this is just illustrative in nature in terms of what we definitely hope to see in terms of new opportunities right here in our backyard. So that wraps up my presentation, and I look forward to the Q&A session afterwards. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully this is coming through okay. My name is Clint and Jurke, and I'd like to welcome all of our attendees to the first Q&A panel. So this session is going to comprise, I think that we have all of our speakers who presented here this morning in the first session available for questions. And I've been receiving a number of questions through the Q&A panel interface. And so the first question that I have is for Jim Everson. And the question is, what is the #1 challenge to canola supply and demand that has changed since March timeframe?
Hi there. Thank you, Clint. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Thank you, Dr. Downey, for moderating our session today. It's an excellent session, as we've come to expect from Canola Week. And hi to Stephan in Germany. Good to see so many faces there. You know, I'd say since March, Clint, Chris Vervaet really hit on the issues that are most pronounced, I think, in terms of supply and demand. And that's mostly to do with the restaurant business in North America and around the world, the half restaurant status and that sort of thing, the closure of major events, tourism, cruising ships and that sort of thing, and the impact that has on the use of vegetable oils and canola oil. Been partly offset, I think, by grocery, as he pointed out, grocery purchasing and single use of canola oil, which has been helpful. Partly offset also by less cooking oil or used cooking oil and grease and so on used in the biofuel segment, which has allowed more use of oil to replace it, vegetable oils to replace that in the biofuel stream. But really the big change, I think, going forward as we kind of return to normal and we're able to distribute vaccines and so on, will be the return of the restaurant industry, and that'll be key for us. I think our industry's done very well dealing with COVID, and part of that is the processing sector that has managed to keep plants moving and really at capacity in Canada, despite the need to have you know, physical separation and that sort of thing going forward. You know, and over the long term, I think the big challenge for us is unlocking the genetic potential of the crop. You know, getting yields to a higher level so we can produce more for global markets. And I know there'll be a discussion later this week about fertility and, you know, best management practices that can be deployed. And certainly Brian pointed out the need for regulatory clarity in Canada so that we can really promote innovation when it comes to, you know, drought, moisture resistance and that sort of thing that will help producers with the environmental factors that impact on the ability of us to meet our full potential of yield with the crop.
Thank you, Jim. That's very helpful. The second question that was submitted, this is for Thomas. Thomas, the question was, what is the European community's or the EU's response to soy coming from Brazil now that there are more reports of coming in of record conversion of farmland to, from rainforest to farmland?
That's a very delicate question. There is no official statement to this, according to my understanding. But it is probably an issue which is going to become hotter in the months to come. I don't know whether Stephan Arens wants to say something on this, but it is cooking a little bit, right?
Okay, if I allowed, I would take over this answer, maybe. Yes, there's a big discussion on the implementation of the use of the soybean, the imported soy, and the European Commission is addressing to replace it from homegrown meals. But we have to be aware of, we have to be very clear that we cannot replace those amounts of imported soy. So that's they are starting a big and long way of transmission process, let me say it. And the European Commission is addressing to support protein crops like peas and beans and so on. But these are small parts of a big issue, and that's not the issue of feeding our cattle or pigs in Europe. In the exchange of the imports from South America, for example. So we are supporting it. We are on this side of the story, but we have to be realistic and of the big amount of imports.
Clint, could I ask a question of Stephan? Given that the coronavirus vaccines are all based on genetic manipulation and are likely to be accepted in Europe. What do you think that impact could have on the acceptance of genetically modified crops and their regulations? Is there any move or aim to bring that to the attention of the population in Europe?
Thank you, Keith, for addressing this question to me. I would very happy if we could make a change in the mind of our population by this coronavirus situation on this new breeding technologies to bring it also to the agricultural sector. But we have a strong debate, like I was showing in my presentation. There are big influencing NGOs working on Brussels and also working here in Germany, who are making a big, we're seeing, okay, that's okay to use the CRISPR-Cas, for example, in the laboratory to produce the vaccine, but it is not okay to use this technique to make breeding and bring it to the fields. It's not I have to bring this message only. It's not my point of view, but this is a strong discussion, and I have addressed it also in my presentation. We have to use these new breeding technologies to improve our varieties, to create new varieties, to meet also the climate change in future.
Thank you, Stephan. The third question that has been submitted is directed towards Kathleen and Brian, and it's from a canola producer here in Canada. And there's concern over rail or train blockages once COVID subsides, which potentially could have an impact upon canola farmers, especially through increased basis. Maybe Kathleen or Brian could comment your thoughts on if or what this situation might present, and if there is any risk analysis being done.
Sure, happy to take that question on. Yeah, certainly transportation links are key and essentially a lifeblood in terms of our sector's ability to export around the world. And And last year and previous seen a number of disruptions of great concern, and even now in terms of COVID, there was a fair amount of work both in terms of monitoring and looking at the impacts of COVID and the health measures to ensure that transportation links were not affected, be that rail or truck. So I think, going forward in terms of sort of that post-COVID-19 recovery, the transportation element will be certainly a key aspect to ensure that we're able to move our exports, our grains and oilseeds around all major markets. It's an ongoing area of focus, I would say.
Thank you, Kathleen. The next question is directed for Brittany. And the question is Chinese aquaculture industry asking for lower fiber, or would they pay more premiums for a reduction in fiber?
Okay, thanks for the question. So would the Chinese aqua industry gain from a lower fiber canola meal, and would they pay more for it? I think it really depends on the species that it would go to. So right now, carp and tilapia are the main species, and they are quite familiar with high fiber diets and have lower protein requirements. So I would say for the industry that we currently are very strongly supplying, that the canola meal we have is utilized very well. We do know that China does seem to be maybe not, there's some growth in aquaculture, but I think there's also a diversification happening of the different types of species that they are producing. And I think there is a shift to have some more specialized species, higher protein requirements. And so as soon as you get into feeding a species that does have higher protein, then the fiber is, really not beneficial to that diet. And so I think in those types of in species and those diets, that there is definitely some potential for a lower fiber canola meal to be utilized at a greater extent, I think is what would happen.
Thank you, Brittany. We have another question for Stephan, and this question is around zero-till or reduced tillage. In Western Canada, zero-till or reduced tillage is quite a common practice. The question is what is the likelihood of this practice being adopted more in Europe for both water conservation and improved sustainability? And in addition to that, is how can we educate policymakers and consumers there around the benefits?
I think the question is calling because of the dry conditions on the limited seeding potential also in Germany and in Europe. I think the no-tillage is getting more and more in Germany and in Europe. But I think the limited seeding potential that we have seen in the last 3 years is not caused by the question tillage or not tillage, because the lack of rain was so deep that it is not, like I said, it's not a question of the tillage or not tillage to have this ideal soil conditions to bring, for example, the rapeseed into the soil. We have seen that it is also in regions where no tillage is practiced. They had many problems by the farmers to bring the rapeseed into the soil to create a good young plant development in the first row. So it have more and more bluffed down. So I think the education and the knowledge is within the farmers and within the farms. But what we have seen in the last 3 years here in Germany and in Europe was such a climatic extreme situation, that it's not has to be handled with tillage or no tillage.
I see that we're getting close to the 15-minute mark for our live Q&A panel. I have one more question, and this one is, I think, best directed towards Kathleen, but certainly open to any of the other panelists that would like to comment on it. Just regarding the Canadian carbon price, or sometimes called tax. Will this carbon price on Canadian canola put our Canadian biofuel crop exports in a better position from a carbon balance perspective?
Good question. And frankly, to be very honest, I don't know. But I do know that the sustainability of our crop is key, and that is something that for example, in a European context, we've been working very closely with the CCC and European Union officials to show that our crop, in fact, meet the renewable energy and GHG guidelines and directives of the European Union. But to the specific question being answered, I don't know. And I do think, though, it is something that we'll, I think, certainly deserves merit in exploring.
A quick add to what Kathleen was saying. There is exploratory discussions ongoing about what a carbon or adjustment would be and how that could be implemented at different borders. It's a very it's a discussion that's in its infancy, and there's no real response on that at the moment from either Canadian, or European, or American governments. As Kathleen outlined, through the Renewable Energy Directive in Europe, practices undertaken by European growers to reduce their carbon emissions by including sequestering carbon in the soil are taken into account. And so when we look at how our crop performs in whether it's the European system, the Canadian system, or the US system, being able to reduce carbon emissions is rewarded for the value of our crop and our access to those biofuel markets.
Just a short addition from my side, from German side. Germany is starting a CO2 tax now in the next year, 21. And so we come from another side. We are not coming from the agricultural side to produce or to reduce carbon in the soil, and then we get a price for it. So we are starting to give a price to the fossil fuels, and starting with some steps in the next year, and that is improving our competitiveness of the biofuels, also from rapeseed. So it's causing a positive aspect for us.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists very much for joining us in this live Q&A. This is our first time doing it, so I think that we did a pretty good job here. Thank you all for your participation. We are going to take just about, well, I guess, an hour and 45-minute break. The conference will resume again at 1:30 Central Standard Time. But it doesn't mean that your opportunities to network are not reduced. Most of our speakers here have agreed that they would join a virtual table back in the networking lounge here for about 15 minutes or so. So please feel free to head over to the networking lounge now. If you have not already logged into it, you will need to enter your email address, and it will send you a code so that you can enter the lounge. There's a number of tables there, and you'll have to poke around a little bit to see any friends or colleagues that you would like to sit and visit with. So definitely take advantage of that. I also want to just one final housekeeping thing is that we do, for this industry update section, normally we would have a speaker from Australia as well joining us, but just due to the time zone and that, the updates from the Australian production and industry is going to be happening on Thursday afternoon. So still an opportunity to get a little bit more world information around canola production. So I want to conclude, and again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll definitely see you again in at 1:30 Central Time. Thank you.